This is, again, MassComm 105 in the fall semester 2020 with a very special group of speakers today to talk to our students about issues of religion, issues of diversity in gender, as well as issues of concern with the LGBT community and outreach from cultural communities, particularly religious ones. So I'm going to start with a pastor, a priest here who has international connections. Please welcome Father James Okafor. Father, thank you for being here. Father, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, very good. Very quickly, give us a little background on where you were born, your upbringing, and your choice of your career.
Okay. So just like Bob introduced me, I'm Father James Okafor. So I was born and I grew up in the eastern part of Nigeria. Actually, I'm from the tribe called the Igbos, IGBO. So it is said that when you see 5 Nigerians in the United States, 4 of them will be from Igbos, you know. So the Igbos are everywhere. So that's where I was born, and I was born in a very close-knitted family with my parents and my siblings. I have 4 brothers and 1 sister. And then I was born into a very Catholic family where I grew up, and that was where I got the interest to go to the seminary. Actually, I went to the seminary when I was about 12 years old, and I grew up in it. That's where I did my high school, and I did my bachelor's in theology and philosophy before I became a priest. I became a priest in 2002. Actually, last August 17 was my 18 years of being a priest. So,
congratulations.
And I was a priest in Nigeria for 5 years before coming over here. So I came over here in 2007. And what actually brought me here was to go to graduate school at Santa Clara. So I went and enrolled in a GPPM program. So I did my master's there between 2008 and 2009. And then by 2010, I went to USF and did my doctorate in Catholic education. So, and I specialize in catechesis and intercultural discussions. So right now, I'm teaching at Archbishop Media High School, and also I'm the chaplain. Some of you know Media High School, the Catholic high school in San Jose. That's where I am. I'm the chaplain, and also I teach religion there. I also teach quarterly at Santa Clara in the GPPM program. So that's
very good.
Something about me.
Very good, Father. Thank you for being here. And Dr. Jennifer Merritt, would you be so kind as well?
Sure. Thank you, Bob. Well, so I did get a chance to watch a little bit of the video where you all introduced yourself. So I'm going to try to do my introduction of myself a little bit in a similar way. So my name is Jen Merritt. I am a white, cisgender, straight woman. I'm a single mom of 2 children. I'm from a family of Italian immigrants, Italian-American immigrants, but also then that's my mother's side. My dad's side are people who are English, Irish, German, and Scottish, and have been here since the Revolutionary War. I am a Catholic, and I work at Catholic University in the Division of Mission and Ministry. Well, we're soon to become that, but right now it's called the Ignatian Center for Jesuit Education, which is a good place for me because I studied Ignatian spirituality. I studied it, but I also have just like practiced it as kind of my own spiritual practice for probably about 30 years. I had a Jesuit spiritual director for 20 years, and then have continued on with that. I have a background in business and in education, so I also teach at this university in the child studies area, and I've been studying pastoral ministry, so I'm one of Father James's students. And so I identify as really like a teacher and a minister in many ways, as like a woman Catholic lay minister, which also has its own kind of interesting, a place in our society. We can talk more about that later. I also really love art and music and theater, and I kind of identify as a little bit of an artist on the side as well. I'm a Democrat, very liberal leaning, and let's see. I also consider myself to be a person of privilege. So we may talk a little bit more about that later.
Very good.
And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, we're very happy to have you both here. And again, we're looking to see when Dr. Joanna Thompson joins us. She'll certainly introduce herself at that point. But let's get into it, because this time will probably go by really fast. With both of our guests, I want to start out with a few questions, and then I'll open it up to the students to jump in. Father, if I can come back to you for a quick minute. Understanding the Black Lives Matter movement. When you and I just met a few weeks ago, we talked briefly about it, but now let's take a little more time and talk about that. Coming from Africa and seeing what's happening in the United States and across the earth, how would you describe the Black Lives Matter movement?
Well, as an African, you know, when people see me, except when I speak, that they will know that I'm not an African American, but every other physical feature, you know, will describe me as an African American, except the way I speak. So most people have already identified me as being part of African American. And so whatever happens to any of African Americans, directly or indirectly, it affects me too. And so when George Floyd was gruesomely murdered on May 25th, it was a big shock, not only to me, but other my brothers and sisters from Africa. So, and that opened a lot of discussions. And with all the movement going on, the Black Lives Matter, so it opened up a lot of discussions, which I was privileged to be part of them. And a lot of people, even some of my students, former students, and some parents reach out to me to show their concern. But one thing I told them is that even though I'm not an African American, even though I may be an American citizen, but I'm not an African American, I identify myself as an African immigrant. So but I know what it means to be a Black in the United States. I wouldn't deny the fact that I've faced what it means to be a Black in the United States. So I will say that movement is something worthwhile, not because of what happened to George Floyd, but because of other things that have been happening, because of the prejudices, the stereotypes, the discrimination, the oppression that we see every day. So, and one thing again that did in my own community, because I have also African community and Nigerian community that I'm also part of, we started having conversation with our children who were born here, you know, trying to hear from them, because even though their parents are Africans, but they identify as African Americans. And so we were so surprised to hear from them that whatever that we're hearing in the news going out there, they have also experienced that in one way or the other in their life, or in their schools, or in their business and other things. So.
And you seem to be indicating that since you've been in this country, you've experienced racism. Can you talk a little bit very quickly about that?
Of course, I wouldn't deny the fact that even though I count myself as one of the privileged ones, because when I moved over here, I was already in my early 30s. So when I came here and having done some pastoral ministries in Nigeria, I was a little bit equipped with some shock absorbers when I was coming. And people that educated me told me it's not gonna be easy. You're going to face a lot of discrimination. So when I came here, it was like I was coming, it's not gonna be easy. But then I was privileged to live in a parish. I lived in a parish with the priest that helped me to come here. He was very gracious to make me to feel at home. But then going out to minister and going to school wasn't an easy thing. Let me share this one experience. I remember one time I was taking a class in Santa Clara within my first year here. And there was a discussion going on the social teachings of the church. And one of the professor asked the question, has any of you in your lifetime felt hungry without any food? And unconsciously, everybody in the class started looking at me. They didn't know when they started looking at me, because they thought, coming from an African and being a Black, you must have felt hungry. Maybe your parents don't have anything. So it was a shock to me, but then it gave me opportunity to explain to them that even though I come from this background, I was privileged to grow up in a family where I was never in any need of anything. My parents provided everything we needed for our life and for our education. So I wouldn't go into other specifics, but it's something we see every day, discrimination and racial treatment once you are a minority, you will face it in one way or the other.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that. And I know the students are going to ask you more interesting questions, so thank you for being here. I appreciate that.
Welcome, Bob.
Jen, let me go to you and ask you to share your thoughts. And again, I want to go back to what you told me when I first met you, that I'm a privileged white woman. I was very proud of you for being so straightforward. Now, explain to me and the class how you meant that.
Well, Bob, I guess kind of building off Father James's story and the question you asked him, and then kind of getting to this place of my own identity as a person of privilege and what that really means right now. The Black Lives Matter movement is a really important movement, and it didn't start just yesterday, right? It's been going on for a while, and the reasons for this movement have been here for a very, very long time. And as a white woman who benefits from what some people might call the moving sidewalk in America, I have to hold the shame associated with the way that people have been treated in this country since slavery. I have to hold that. I have benefited from that. In some situations, it's been overt, and in other ways more subtle. But that is the way that our society is set up, because those are the structures that perpetuate privilege. But the thing is, I can hold that shame and at the same time understand that it's not all over. I can make my own choices too to try to turn around and walk the other way. So, as Beverly Tatum says, she wrote this book called Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? And she talks about this moving sidewalk. And she says that, the sidewalk moved to advance people of privilege. And so if I go to rent a house and I'm given the opportunity to rent that house, I might not know that the person who came before me was rejected because of the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or their religion or something else. I might not know that, but I've still benefited. And in other situations, I might know very clearly that I have benefited. But it's still my job to turn around on that moving sidewalk and start walking the other way. And when enough of us do that, we begin to change the flow. And I feel like we're at a really, really crucial time in our history right now, because many more people are waking up and seeing this moving sidewalk and saying, we have to all turn around together. In my own story, as I had told Bob, it's a complicated history. I have a relative named Manasseh Cutler, who was one of the authors of the Northwest Ordinance of 1786. And he was a minister, and he wrote into that that there would be no slavery in the Northwest Territory. But at the same time, his brother was he was my uncle, great uncle, but his brother was my grandfather, or great-great-grandfather, and he was a loyalist, and he, sided with the crown and ended up having to go to Canada for a while. So within our own family, there were two people who had different perspectives on the American Revolution, and one person who was even kind of ahead of his time in saying, hey, there should be no slavery in this land. Well, fast forward many years, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I grew up in a community that was affluent. My family wasn't affluent, but I was in that mix. And when I would go to downtown Cleveland, I could see that there was abject poverty in downtown Cleveland. And most of the people in my community were white, and most of the people in downtown Cleveland were African American. And I felt that shame as a child. But also at the same time, because I was part of an affluent society, I had privileges that I was taking for granted and not even realizing. For example, being invited into a variety of clubs and societies that were exclusive to white people. And, as I grew older and I came to really understand this, I wanted to work, against oppression, right? Oppression, which is discrimination based on something like racial oppression, discrimination based on race, and the power to enforce it. I wanted to work against that. But I also can't just take that on by myself. I need to work closely with partners who've experienced it in ways that I haven't. And so at different points in time in my life, whether it was working with urban schools or working with programs in urban San Jose as part of my job now, I'm really fortunate to benefit from the wisdom and the learned experience and life experience of people who have really lived these various forms of oppression in ways that I have not. And together, I think we can work towards making that sidewalk go the other way.
Very good. Thank you for that response. I appreciate that. In a moment, I'm going to ask 3 people, Madison, Michael, and Amani, to get us started. Then everybody else can jump in after that. But let me ask one more question of both our guests, beginning with Father. Father, I wanted to let you know that we talk candidly about issues of diversity. And when it comes to religious cultures, you're very well aware that the Catholic Church has been beat up in the media for many, many years now for a variety of allegations and proven incidents of sexual misconduct by priests, mismanagement of money, all kinds of challenges. This is a career that you work in. Talk to us a little bit about, from your perspective, what have you dealt with in terms of public response to those sort of allegations?
Thank you, Bob. That's a very good question. You know, I have also experienced in my own life concern and love and the kindness from people, especially when issues like you just mentioned, when they come up. I remember 2 or 3 years ago when the news about the abuses and sexual abuse by priests in Pennsylvania came out, you know. I remember how my colleagues at the high school came to my office to assure me, we know you, we have been here with you for more than 7 years, and we trust you, and we know that we can always count on you. It was very encouraging. The same thing when the George Floyd issue happened. So that has been, you know, some the things I've received, but then it doesn't make that I take for granted, you know, the way people react sometimes, you know, the way people react sometimes when you encounter them one-on-one, or when you encounter them with their families and with their children, you see them unconsciously protecting their own children because it's already in their head that every one of us will have that tendency to abuse. So I'm not denying whatever that has happened in the church. They are out there, the facts speak for themselves. But then the truth is that sometimes we end up in this, what we call the fallacy of hasty generalization, that one person does something wrong doesn't mean that everybody does that. And we know we can be victims of that too. And that's what I do in my own ministry and in my own profession. I try to live my life to make sure that I convince people beyond every reasonable doubt that this is what I believe in and this is what I do. You know, I'm not going to go around changing everybody, but one-on-one, what I tell myself day by day is when I encounter people, I will try to prove to them that I have been trained and formed to avoid any kind of discrimination, whether it's cultural or sexual or any kind of discrimination that the church has been attacked, that the church is facing day by day. So.
Very good. As you were speaking, I was thinking of a guest speaker we had a few weeks ago who was an African-American police officer who was in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protests and talking about the tug of war that he was feeling because he's Black, his father and he are police officers. He grew up in Los Angeles. He could relate to some of the challenges, and yet he said there was no place in the police force for behavior like the one that happened to George Floyd. You sound like you're saying the same thing about the Catholic Church. And yet there are many surveys, I've had the students look at the Pew Research, that talk about young people just don't trust the Catholic Church. How do you react to young people who feel that way?
Yeah, because I deal with them on day by day. Now I don't see them in person because we do everything virtually. What I do on my own is that every young person, every teenager that I encounter, I make effort to leave a long-lasting impression in him or her. I'm not gonna touch every one of them, but I know I can touch some of them. And what I tell them is that even though this already happened in the church, we can't correct it by running away from the church. Let me take just a quick analogy. If I'm having issues in my family, having issues with my parents or having issues with my siblings, I'm not gonna correct those issues by running away. I have to still come home to talk about it. So I tell the young people, the church belongs to you. You are the future of the church, as Pope Francis will always say. Come in and be part of that. No matter how frustrated it might look, you can always make a difference.
Very good. Thank you, Father. And then Jen, last couple of questions for you, and then I'll go to Madison, and then Manny and Michael. When you were talking about your family history, I was also thinking about my family history, and I've never told this to the class, but for the first 18 years of my life, I grew up in a domestic violence situation. And it was because of the church that I was able to stay focused on school, stay in school, and to go on and have a career in media and finally in education. So I know there are negative connotations with the Catholic Church. I fully understand that, and I don't appreciate that. But I also see the value of the church. As a woman in the church, given the way the church historically had put women second, not at the altar, not up front, how does that make you feel?
Boy. That's a very interesting question, Bob. You know, there are some things about the dogma of the Catholic Church that are very challenging to me. It's as it relates to women, it isn't even so much about being a priest or not being a priest as it is about who has power and authority to make decisions. And there are some things built into the structure that say that at the very top, women cannot have potentially, have an opportunity to be in that position of power. And that's very hard. Another thing that's very hard for me about the Catholic Church is their stance on gay marriage. I really can't see that. I can't embrace that. It's very difficult. At the same time, I know that the Catholic Church is comprised of human beings, that human beings are not perfect, and that the church itself, the word Catholic means universal. It means that we are all supposed to be welcome here, and we are all participating in, what we see as the kingdom of God, God's reign, which is that there is love for everyone, and no one is supposed to be excluded. It says it all over the Gospels. So that to me is what the Catholic Church is. If I go back to the message of the founders of the church, it's about universal acceptance. It's about social justice. It is about overturning political structures that keep some people down and other people on top. And so, I'm happy to be taking New Testament now, so I'm kind of really into this, but it's, it was a time when almost everyone was owned by someone else. Women and children were owned by the man of the house. Most men were owned by the people they worked for. If they weren't actually slaves, they were indentured servants of some sort. And so, there was this figure, Jesus Christ, that came into the mix and said, that's not okay. We have to eat at one table together. And so that to me is what Catholicism is, and that's how I embrace it, and that's how I try to live that in my own work, in my teaching, in my ministry. And it's just like that moving sidewalk in American society and global society. You have to have enough people moving in the direction of equality and solidarity for anything to change.
All right, very good. All right, I'm going to get out of the way now and let the students take over at random, starting with Madison, and then I'll go to Michael and Amani. Then after that, folks, it's on you. Speak up. Go for it, Madison.
Oh, hi, guys. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for joining us today. My question is for Father Okafor. So, you're from Nigeria, and when the British colonized Nigeria, one of the tools that they used was Catholicism, and that, that brought its own share of pain. And my question is, how has that, since you were from there, how has that changed and shaped your perspective of Catholicism rather than someone who grew up here and was Catholic?
Okay. Thank you, Madison, for that question. Actually, when the British came, they came with the colonialism, but the church also came at the same time. So the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church, which is the Episcopalian Church here, they almost arrived the same time towards the late of 19th century. And they brought all this fighting, infight between the Protestants and the Catholic Church, which is still existing up to today. And so with time now, just as you asked the question, how has that affected my practice of faith? So when I was growing up, it was like we were indoctrinated to think that the Catholic Church is the best one, and every other church, every other religion doesn't make any sense. And if you also know the history of Nigeria, you will know that the northern part of Nigeria, the Muslims, the Islamic religion, they have been having a lot of problems with the eastern part of Nigeria with the Christians. And so because of that, it brought us a lot of some kind of biases and prejudices against every other religion apart from the one your parents indoctrinated you to in. So, but when I came here and I started growing, because I say I'm growing, I started growing and reading and studying and mixing up with a lot of people, I started finding something good in every religion, in every Christian denomination. So back to your question, Madison, I would say what I took away from Nigeria before coming here has evolved greatly, and that's what has made me the person I am today. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Michael?
Yes, this question is also for Father Okafor. I also wanted to ask, where are you currently residing and what state, just out of curiosity?
Okay, so I live right now, I'm speaking to you from St. Justin Parish, Santa Clara, even though my background shows Archbishop Midi High School. So I live at St. Justin, Santa Clara in the rectory, even though I'm not a part of the parish ministry here, but I help sometimes. But my full ministry as a priest of this San Jose Diocese is the high school ministry. That is where
Wonderful.
I spend all my time. Yeah.
So we are quite different people. I am actually, I would identify as a homosexual, Jewish, cis male. And I wanted to know, being that we're living in such a progressive state as California, and where so many things are widely accepted, many religions, different sexualities, the fact that people are feeling more comfortable expressing themselves, how gender is more fluid, how just so many different factors of how the world is so much more than just black and white now. There's just so many more opportunities for people for self-realization now that we've become in a much more accepted society. What are your opinions on seeing all of these new things coming along where people might not identify with male or female and they feel that they are non-binary, for example, or if someone feels that they are a part of the LGBTQIA, for those who are confused about IA, that would be intersexual and asexual. And I just want to know what your opinions on people when it comes to things like marriage, when it comes to things like just so many, like different sort of like connections with people like that, because as we're saying, we want everyone to be happy, to feel in a happy, fulfilled marriage. And I just want to know your extent on how you feel about things like that.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Good question. My own stand on that, number one, I represent, when I'm at the pulpit talking, I represent the church, and I stand by what the church teaches. I mean the Catholic Church. But then within what the church teaches, the church does not take away the idea of openness and dialogue. And that comes from Pope Francis, that we have to grow in being open to other people and also dialogue. One thing very common we see running across everywhere is that sometimes people are not well equipped with the knowledge, with the skills and the attitudes they need to relate with other people outside their own comfort zone. And that is what I try always to tell myself and tell other people. How much do you know about the other people? I learned this language from Jane, cultural humility. How much do we know? And I've been able to go and explore that. Even if we're very knowledgeable, skillful, if we don't have that cultural or even religious humility, we're not gonna be open-minded to get ourselves in dialogue with other people. So without you, Michael, telling us about yourself now, I wouldn't have known anything about you, but I was able to know because you opened up the dialogue. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And Michael, to be fair to you and to our priest friend, when I first met him, I told him that I was gay and I'm married. And as it turns out, one of the other guest speakers who was planning to be with us today, I just got word from Jennifer that she's caught up in something. She cannot get here in time. So I'm going to invite her to come back and talk to the class at a later date. She's lesbian, she's married, she's got a very successful career, and yet she's heavily involved in the Catholic Church. So those are the things that people have to understand. Sometimes the doctrine, and as Jen said, the dogma but the humanity, they have to be forged together in a way where we care about each other as the primary goal. Let me go to Amani.
Hi, so first of all, I have a question for both of our guests today, if I may, fairly short. My first question is for Ms. Merritt. So a little bit of background about me. I'm Muslim, but my mother was actually raised Irish Catholic. So I do know a bit about Catholicism, and the way that you speak about Catholicism is very similar to the way that I speak about Islam, kind of existing as like a personal relationship between yourself and the Lord and outside of the dogma and this kind of sexist power structures that have been created by human beings. How do you view the difference between what you believe is the actual message of Jesus and the way that the church exists and operates, and how do women, people of color, queer people claim a spot at that table that you were talking about, the long single table that Jesus wants us all to eat at together? You're still muted.
Thank you, Mike. That is a really powerful question, and I really appreciate the way that you express your question too. You know, what I have said for many years is that, you know, the Catholic Church is an institution. It's an institution that is very old. For me, the way that the church comes alive is in the people that are part of that church, and also in particular the people who have taken vocations in that church. So over my life, I have known people like Father James and like a few Jesuits and some religious sisters who've had a very significant influence on my own life. And the way that they live the gospel is the way that I experience the church. And so I have not felt so much, you know, oppressed by the structures personally, because in those relationships, what I have found is freedom and an opening up. And within Ignatian spirituality, it's really, it can also be very accessible on a secular level, or I should say perhaps ecumenical or non-Catholic, because it's about finding God in all things. And that is my approach to my own Catholicism. It's finding God in all people, finding God in all experiences, finding God in relationships, and finding beauty in situations everywhere. And it doesn't mean that you don't recognize pain, suffering, difficulty, or the injustice, but it means that within that space, you find a way to make connections in order to work for a better society, a better world. And I hope that answers your question. That's my own take on it.
Thank you so much. So my next question is for Father James. Thank you again for being with us today.
You're welcome.
So I not being a Catholic and having many family members who, like my mother, left Catholicism, I didn't grow up with such a positive view of Catholicism or of priests, but I was always taught to respect religious leaders because they are people who chose this vocation in order to try to change problems that they see within their community. And I think I speak for many of us when I say that a lot of younger people have a problem with religion as cultural imperialism. So we don't really like ministry that just kind of comes in, teaches you about the Bible, and doesn't solve any of the problems that exist within your society. So as a person who lives now in Santa Clara and who has lived in Nigeria, what are the problems that your communities face, and how do you seek to address them in your ministry?
Okay. So right now, apart from my teaching ministry at the high school, which is also my community, and they are facing this all these challenges you are mentioning here, many and other people already mentioned. And then I have also the big African, we call it the people of African descent, people coming from both Africans, Caribbeans, and also African Americans. And then I have also Nigerian community. I deal with all these communities, and I see something running through in all these communities. And one of them is what you just said, the young people coming along with what the older people believe and teach, you know. But then what I always tell the people, especially the young people, especially during this COVID, I've had the opportunity to be with them in different panels, and they spoke to their parents and they spoke to us, the religious leaders. I always tell them, try to come inside. You can only make a change when you come inside. You cannot make a change when you run away. People make changes in institutions when they make effort to come inside. And so I tell them, by staying at the periphery and criticizing the church belongs to all of us. And that's what Pope Francis has been telling all of us. Whether you are gay, whether you are bisexual, whether you are transgender, this church belongs to all of us. All of us made in the image and likeness of God, we are part of it. And so all the challenges we are facing, and remember, Ameni, the challenge you are facing as a person is different from that Michael is facing. It's only when you come together and say, oh, are you facing this? Are you facing this? How are we going to talk about it to make a change within the context of the church? As a minister in the church, I know I do a lot of ministries to make a change. I started 6 years ago to go down to juvenile hall, to go and encounter those young people there, to speak with them and tell them, even though you are here, this is not the end of your life. I have done hospital ministry. I have come down to San Jose University to do something. So I always tell myself, every opportunity you have, so make people to be open-minded, seize that opportunity. And when Bob asked me to come, Professor Bob asked me to come here, I said, this is another opportunity. I'm gonna put this in my schedule. I'm come here and say something maybe that will touch one person. So I'm not gonna change everything, but even if I change one thing, I have done something for that day. So I hope this answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. I like that you mentioned sort of practical things that don't really have to do with religious indoctrination, like visiting hospitals, visiting people who are incarcerated, who are juveniles. I think that kind of practical service of other human beings is really important to communities in general and to religious communities. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Jennifer wants to ask a question. Go for it.
I just wanted to have a follow-up question of you, Amani, and if anyone else also wants to share how this relates to their own faith tradition, I would be interested. But I really appreciated hearing your question, and you said that the way that I described my my own understanding of Catholicism, it's similar to the way you experience your relationship with God in Islam. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your choice and how you experience God in that way. And if anyone else would like to share their own faith experience and how that relates to a tradition or to spirituality, I would love to know.
This would be an appropriate time for the class to share with our guests. Manny, are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, my father is Palestinian and was raised Muslim. My mother is Irish and was raised Catholic. And my mother always had the view of religion, and probably because her father later became an atheist, that if there is a God, he wants you to be a good person, to be kind to other people, and to have a relationship with him. And it doesn't need to have much structure or ritual beyond that. So she's not very religious, but she's always believed that there is a God and she wants that relationship with him. My father was domestically abusive to my mother and to us kids, and I had a really hard time with the way that he framed God. And I always, like my mother, believed that there is a God, I want a relationship with this higher power. But I had a hard time with all of the dogma and things that he was trying to indoctrinate us with, because so much of it served his agenda. And he was kind of framing God in the image of himself. And so God became a very abusive figure. And as I grew up and my father left the house finally when my parents divorced and I began to go to the mosque again by myself, I had a very different view of religion that was far less fear-based and more based on love and acceptance and having this personal relationship with God that has much less to do with organized religion. I think organized religion is kind of a misnomer, because we do have things in common and we come together as communities who believe that we believe the same things. But I also identify as a queer person, and so I'm a little bit of a black sheep in my community occasionally. But there's a quote from Rumi that there are as many ways to God as there are flight paths of prayers at dawn. So anytime a person is praying and creating that relationship between themselves and God, that's a religion in a sense.
Thank you, Amanda. That was beautifully said. Anybody else in class want to share their religious thoughts right now?
I think it's interesting how Amanda mentioned, like, basically having that enlightenment after the fact that her father left, just because I feel like, at least personally with a lot of people around our age, that's kind of how they came back into religion. Like, personally with me, it was not the same situation, but more so when I was younger, my parents did push religion on us, but they never forced us to go to church or anything. And so growing up, I wasn't religious basically at all until I reached, I want to say, being 18 or 19. And I got involved with some friends who were religious, and I just said, okay, I'll try going to church with you guys and seeing how that goes. And then compared to childhood and then being an adult, it was a completely different experience of being accepted, like being in God's love and everything like that.
Thank you, Veronica. Very nice. I've been watching Ray's face. Ray, you look like you've been wanting to say something.
Sure. This kind of just a little statement, also a question to Jennifer. Personally, I do not believe in God. I do, however, believe that religion was created by man to provide comfort to the unknowing. Now, with Jennifer, you said that you mentioned you wanted to find God within people. In that sense, do you believe in God as a sort of physical deity, or is it more of a metaphorical believing, if that makes sense in that question?
I believe in the Spirit of God in all people. And so I wouldn't call that metaphorical. I think it's a real thing. That's my own experience of it. I mean, I could kind of get into sort of my own idea of like Christology and Catholic theology, but I think that the point is really more that if there is a spirit of love in the world and it comes to you through other people, that is something that is transcendent and immanent at the same time. It transcends us, but it's also here with us in this moment together.
Cool.
I think someone put in the chat that it's a little personal, and I hope no one feels pressured to say anything, but since I'm talking about my faith and answering questions, I thought I'd just put it out there that maybe some other people would like to share theirs too. I think it's a nice opportunity, but also it doesn't have to necessarily be about religious tradition. It also you can talk about your own values as well, but I also don't want to change the trajectory of the whole class, Bob, either. So
no, you're doing fine. And Jesus, looks like you want to talk.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to share my religious experience. I've actually kind of grew up with two. Me and my folks, we grew up Roman Catholics, and when I was younger, we always went to church every Sunday, very strict about it. But around when I wouldn't say like teenage years, like 13-ish, all of a sudden we switched to Mormon. And I always questioned why. And it was something to do with like, my cousins and my aunts and uncles also being Mormon. So I guess my family wanted to just join in. And I just thought it was very confusing because like I thought like Roman Catholic, being Roman Catholic, like that was all it is. Like that's all there was to me at the time because I was very young. And then I was a Mormon for, I want to say 3 years-ish until my family switched back to Roman Catholic. Because they just didn't like that the church, the Roman church was like the Mormon church, was asking for like money for donations, a lot of it, and they would go towards like field trips, and it would go towards like a lot of like luxurious things that my family didn't appreciate. So that's why they switched back. So it was very confusing experience for me, to say the least. I'm still very religious, but I just wanted to express like it was very confusing growing up, having two religions basically.
Jesus, thank you, man. I appreciate that. That was excellent. I see that Derek and Paulina have their hand up. Let's start with Derek and then go to Paulina.
Well, Dr. Merritt and Father Okafor, thank you guys for joining us today. Really appreciate it. So usually I'm very like private when it comes to my religion because, you know, it's one of like we live in a social media age, and it's like one of the last, I guess the last topics that you can be private about. But I'm Catholic. My mom, she made me, you know, go do all the sacraments, get my first communion, get my confirmation. And I just found out earlier this summer that I'm going to be a godfather. So another responsibility. And I've kind of used religion just as more of a kind of a meditation tool because I've battled depression and anxiety. I've lost both my grandfathers at an early age. I lost my second grandfather earlier this year before COVID. And I just want to ask you guys, as a young person, how have you used like religion and prayer like in times of adversity or times of just like either losing a loved one or going through a personal struggle? And I guess we could start with Dr. Merritt and then go to Father Okafor.
Thank you for that question. So when I was in college, I remember I lived in this this high-rise dorm, and I would have to like walk many flights of steps up and down. I don't remember why we didn't have an elevator, but I would spend time like literally going down and going up, always remembering the things that I was grateful for. And that was a way to remind myself that I had things to be grateful for when I was feeling depressed, lonely, sad, left out sometimes, and anxious. I definitely had a lot of anxiety in college. And somehow those prayers of gratitude helped me to kind of hold on to the fact that there were many things to be grateful for. And later, when I started studying Ignatian spirituality and trying to practice Ignatian spirituality, that's really kind of for me where it's the way that it's structured. That's how it begins. It's you're inviting in the light, you're being grateful. You're also looking at these spirits of darkness and lightness in your life, and you are sitting with them and accepting them. And then listening for an invitation to the next step of your journey and trying to respond to an invitation that pulls you to a place where you feel joy, where you feel love, and not pulls you deeper into desolation. So for me, Ignatian spirituality has been kind of a good way to try to grapple with some of the difficult moments by practicing gratitude and then holding the pain and then moving forward. There's also another organization that I'm part of called Al-Anon, and it's a 12-step program. And I think the big thing I've learned in that is that, you know, in my life, as you know, as a single mom, there are moments when I really not sure like where the next meal is going to be coming from. And you realize that there's nothing is ever going to all be present in your hands at once. You're always going to have something that is an uncertainty or a fear or depression or sadness. But then at the same time, there's all these good things happening. And so to try to hold both, to try to celebrate the joy while there's also the pain there, I think that for me has been the hardest lesson of life, but it's something that I've really tried to live into as I've gotten older.
Yeah, Jen. Actually, my grandma's part of Al-Anon. She's like I think she's in charge of I'm from Monterey County, so she's in charge of like our Salinas chapter, if you will. So it's funny that you bring that up, but thank you so much.
And you wanted Father to react as well?
Yeah, that would be great, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Derek, for that question. Just to add to what Jen already said, and as I said at the beginning, I grew up, you know, the first thing after calling mom and dad was to call God. You know, that was part of me. So, and that was actually how I got to become a priest. But I wouldn't say that my spirituality and relationship with God has not evolved. It has been evolving even as an adult. You know, I practice different things to make sure that I am present to myself and also to other people. So, like, I do a lot of meditation and contemplation, you know, spending time, which in our time they call it now mindfulness, you know. So, but in my own case, when I do meditation and contemplation is more of just prayer of silence. So when I do that, I use that opportunity just to reflect the presence of God in my life. Just going back to what Jen said, the gratitude, especially in difficult moments. I always say, oh, something like this happened to me before, and God was with me. I know whatever that is happening now, something good will come out of it. God knows why it is happening. That has been my act of faith. And I do it on a daily basis because I've come to know that the problems of Monday are different from that of Tuesday. And by the time you come to Wednesday, it changes, and then it keeps changing and changing. So the presence helps me to, overcome some of those challenges.
Thank you. Let's go to Ariana and then to Ruth.
Professor, I wanted to ask.
I know, hold on. Let's go to Ariana. Let's go in this
okay.
order. Ariana, Ruth, and then I'll come back. Ariana?
Okay, so yes. So my question was also for both Jennifer and Father Okafor. So you guys can it's a question that's one for both. So one thing that I was thinking about was the idea of morality, our morals, and also what we do in our life. So basically, some churches we all know don't necessarily agree with things like abortion and gay marriage, while other churches are more accepting. And I just wanted to know how you guys feel about that line being drawn in terms of maybe politics. We have our morals where we might believe in something like pro-life or something, but we may not agree with the idea of having it pushed on other people. So I was just saying, how do you guys feel about the line being drawn between our morals in our personal life, but our morals among the societies that we live in? Because a lot of times there's a lot of conversation that people say that are gospel, through the gospel, it should be a theocracy, that our government should be based on our religious morals. And other times we have situations where we feel like they should be separated. So I just wanted to know how you guys both felt about that idea of separation of religious morality, or whether they should be together.
Do you want to go first?
Father James, I was just going to ask if you would go first because
Okay.
I'm having a problem with my computer. I'll be right back. I think it's a little power issue, but I'm playing.
So, Ariana, so thank you for that question. Very good question, about the issue of morality. Just like you said, that is it's becoming relative. Somebody will believe in this and another person will believe in another thing. But one thing I've always, studied, and I grew up with it, and it's part of my life that I tell people. So for us, in our conscience, within each and every one of us, God has created in us that conscience. And that conscience needs to be well informed and formed. Well informed and formed. And it has to be well informed and formed within the context of love of God and love of neighbor and love of oneself, So when we have all these things being thrown out there, it's left for us now to come back and say, of all these things I'm hearing day by day, which one now will I use to form my conscience and to inform my conscience? And how does this, that I believe, answer the question? How does it answer the question of the problem another person is facing? You mentioned the issue of abortion. You cannot begin to make decision about what the issue of abortion is all about until you are well informed about the whole spectrum of knowledge about that. If we just hear what people say and follow it just hook, line, and sinker, then we're not going to inform our conscience very well. So it goes back again to our conscience, because all of us, we have the freedom to choose for or against. But when we are choosing for, we make sure that our choosing within the context of well-informed and formed conscience.
I don't know, is Jen, are you back with us? All right, then.
Yes, I am back.
All right, if you would, go ahead very quickly.
Well, I think Father James said that beautifully. It is about having an individual sense of conscience, morality, values, and respecting that each person has that, so people can make personal decisions for themselves. When it comes to politics, it is hard because no matter what the issue is, there's not going to be one person that fully represents all of my values in their platform. there'll be something that is not exactly in line with my own thinking, but then I have to make the best choice I can to vote for someone who best can represent what I believe as a whole. So for me, social justice is a very important goal. So in this coming election, for example, thinking about that as a broad spectrum thing is going to be an important part of my own ability to make a choice about who to vote for, in the midst of having individual personal issues that I will grapple with on my own. I hope that's helpful.
Very good. We have about 15 minutes left. Let's go to Ruth, and then we will go to Paulina.
Hello, my question is both for Dr. Merritt and Father Okafor.
Very quickly.
So, okay. So I have like a weird like background with religion. My father is actually a priest, and then my grandfather on my mom's side is also a priest. But they have like very different views. Like my grandfather is homophobic. He does like have sexist views, and like I understand that's because he's older. But then my dad, who's actually like still religious, like he is more accepting, and like the two of you both seem more accepting. So I'm just like, how do you go about talking to other like religious like leaders and people very involved in church when they have different views that aren't as accepting as like they should be?
Father?
Father James?
Okay, so Ruth, that's a very good question. How do we go about it? I think one thing also is to begin to listen to both of them differently and know things they agree on, because every religion has something good in it. No matter whatever that religion is, there is always something. I don't think there is any religion that is 100% bad. There is something good. So listening to both of them will be an opportunity to look at the common ground where people can agree on, and that is that's the way to have a religious tolerance, where we look at the common grounds. There can never be a interreligious dialogue or interreligious discussion if we don't look at common grounds. What do we agree on? What do we don't agree on? And those things we agree on, which I know the universal love of oneself and love of other people, I know every religion will agree on that. Those things we agree on is the basic thing that we try to emphasize each time we gather together as people from different religious backgrounds. Does it make sense, Ruth?
Yes.
I think that really says it all. But I would perhaps just add, as you're talking about two different people, one person who's more open and perhaps accepting of everyone, and another person who seems to be more narrow. You can listen, you can ask questions, and you can also model for that person the openness that you hope to find in them, and perhaps they'll become more open as they see you modeling it.
Very good. I know we talk about that a lot in this class. Have a voice and listen and learn. It's the best way to move forward together. Paulina?
Yeah, thank you. I have two different questions for both of our speakers, if I can, or I need to pick one.
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 Go.
Okay, Jennifer, I noticed that no one asked you about your work, and as international student, I rent a room for a while in a Mexican household, and I learned that you're working with Latina community, right? So correct me if I understand it wrong, but you work with them and you connect with them through religion and because you want to fix this injustice. But what are the biggest challenges at your work? Because you said that you're white with privilege, and like, how do you manage all these things?
Great question. Boy, we could stay for quite a while to talk about that. So actually, while the idea behind the place-based initiative that we have is called Thriving Neighbors, but the idea is it kind of comes from the story of the Good Samaritan, that two people kind of cross the road to meet each other. But it's important to remember it's not about fixing someone else. It's about working together in solidarity, learning from that person's lived experience, learning from their wisdom, and then working with them to make positive change in the world. So I'm like a party host. I introduce college students and faculty to residents from the Greater Washington neighborhood. Most of them are immigrants. Many of them are women because their partners are working, full time. And we together come up with programs like tutoring programs or public health programs or economic capacity building programs. And the resident from the community, the faculty member, and the student all have an equal role in that. It's co-authorship. And I get to have the privilege of being one of the people that introduces them. But I could never do that on my own. I don't speak Spanish, and I was hired into that job. And that, again, is a dimension of privilege. I think it came from my background in doing community work in other places. And someone in hiring me said, oh, we think that she could do it here. And so I've worked very closely with people who do speak Spanish, knowing that I am really deferring to their expertise, not only in terms of language, but in terms of culture. And I hope to be very reverent in those situations for the people who have the expertise, and to sit back and enjoy being the party host more than the person who's doing all the work, because we're doing it together, but I can't fix another person. We happen to share religious beliefs too, but that's not always at the heart of what we're doing. We don't talk about that as much. We do have retreats together, and we do share some spiritual conversations, but a lot of what we're doing is really capacity building in the community.
Father, very quickly, if you'd like to respond, then Martin is waiting for you.
Okay, I think Jen said it is what she does, so I don't have much to add to this. Yeah.
All right, Martin, go ahead.
Hello, my question is for Father Okafor. Say you are meeting with children of the teenager's age, and you're giving them a lesson, and you notice that there is a student that isn't very interested, very kind of distant, and you talk to them and you find out that they're only there because of they're being forced by relatives. Now, what would be your approach to that child? Would you try to coax them into the lesson, or would you ask them what it is that they actually want, or do you think it is that they actually need to be religious, that kind of deal? Because in my experience, I've actually had that before, where I really had no interest in Catholicism when I was younger, but I was forced to go, and my experience is the father that I was with just beat it into me that, oh, it's because you have to be religious. And I was wondering what you would do in that situation.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. That's a very great question. And it's like something I meet on almost all the time, especially when we begin the school year. Now we are doing everything on virtually, that I'm missing that. But I know for years that I've been at the high school, I've encountered students who were having the same issue we're having. They didn't want to come to a Catholic school. They wanted to go to public school, but their parents forced them. My advice to them all the time is that, your parents did this not out of bad will, because they wanted you to have the best of education where you will be safe. I always tell them, be open-minded and explore this. Take time and get into this, and then get there and get to know, why are my parents trying to put me into this situation? And I will tell you, I have come to, seen some students, when they are graduating, they come to me and say, remember that day you spoke to me during lunch? It changed everything for me. It helped me to be open-minded, so that I will explore this without thinking that my parents are punishing me. And Martin, remember, there are so many other things our parents usually they force us to do in our life. They force us to go to school, even when we don't want to go to school. They force us to do our homework. They force us to clean our bathrooms and to dress our rooms and to do everything. Those are the good things. Eventually, they help us to become who we are. So when we grow up now and we become more mature to make some decisions, we can choose and select what actually we need to be the best person we are created to be. So.
Very good, Father. Thank you. We have 5 minutes left. Michelle Perez, and then Shannon Gerardo.
Yeah, so I have a question that Jennifer or Father Okafor could answer. So I'm Catholic, and I've not only noticed this with some Catholics, but also many Christians, but what would you say to the people who weaponize their faith and use it to hate or judge others who believe differently than they do?
So Michelle, quick answer to that. Tell them to go and learn from the life of Jesus Christ, because they are not learning from the life of Jesus, who never condemned anybody. Jesus never condemned anybody. He welcomed everybody. So tell them what you are doing is not Christ-like. It's not the life of Christ, okay? So.
And also, fear is not necessarily a great starting point for building relationship and connection. And I think particularly in a time of pandemic, when people are separated so much, it tends to make us like kind of go into our heads and focus on ourselves, and that can bring up a lot of anxiety and a lot of frustration. And it's easy to become frustrated, fearful, and distrustful, even more than usual in this context, in this time. I'm finding it in myself. I think, am I interpreting correctly what someone said in that email? That was offensive. And I think to myself, now wait a minute, that was an email. That is a linear communication. If I really want to have an idea of what that person means, I should talk to them and share my feelings, And so I think that, having real conversations and encouraging people to lead with hope, trust, and faith in other people, as opposed to leading with fear, that makes a difference.
In the final few minutes of the class, I would ask our guests to talk a little bit about this event that's coming up in the first weekend in November. Jennifer, you reached out to me and asked me to participate. Why in the world would you want to do that?
Well, Father Okafor invited me, and so I invited you, and I'm really excited about this. But we are hosting a workshop that goes over the course of 2 weekends. It's a Friday night, Saturday, this coming weekend, and then we skip Halloween, and then we come back. And it is building intercultural competency for ministers. But we're not just talking about competencies. We're definitely, we're looking at what is, we will spend some time looking at our own identities, cultural competencies, but also what is oppression? What does that look like? How does it play out in our society? What can we do about it? And what does it mean to have cultural humility in addition to cultural competence? Can I know about another person's culture and also know that person? And Father James, what else can we say about it?
Yeah, just to thank Professor Bob for accepting to be there, because Professor Bob will help us to discuss all these obstacles to intercultural relationship. And one of them will be racism, just like what Jen said, it builds up, racism. So I'm looking forward that Professor Bob, with all his experiences, will be able to call it what its name is and be able to tell people what it's all about. So,
well, thank you. And I certainly am glad to accept the invitation on behalf of the students. I will share their voices through my comments there. But I want to say thank you to you both for coming in today. I'm sorry that Joanna wasn't able to join us. We'll bring her in later at some time this semester. But it's very important to open up a conversation about religion, because I find way too many people my age and younger who have thoughts about religion but don't understand the concept. And this institutional stuff, I always tell my students, I believe that the American Constitution is one of the most impressive documents in world history. Having said that, it kept women from voting for most of the time, and it made Black people 3/5 human. Nothing is perfect. That includes the church. That includes all other institutions. You just can't divorce yourself from something simply because 2 or 3 of the elements are not working for you. There's some benefit of it all, and Father, you said it best. Look for the good. Look for the common ground. From there, you can have a conversation and make change. We're going to wrap it up at that point. We're almost out of time. Anybody have a final thought for our guests?
I should say thank you.
I had a question.
Very quickly, haven't got much time. Go.
This is for both of you guys. Do you guys believe that religion is imposed within society? And do you believe that men are pictured as superior within the religion? Because I know that in regards to the Last Supper, there's only men in that image. And in regards to religion, there is in God we trust, it's under the law, and it's under the Pledge of Allegiance. What is your guys' take on that?
We only have 1 minute, folks.
Go ahead, Jane.
Is religion imposed on our society? I think that the founding fathers did have a lot of religious influence in what they were writing and saying and doing, and things like one nation under God, etc. I do think that we've evolved to a place where there's an idea of religious pluralism, and that it's there's an implication that this is the God of your understanding, right? Whatever that means to you. I'm also hopeful that things are becoming more egalitarian in terms of gender and everything else, and race, and etc. in our society. As for the Last Supper painting, I think we might have to hold that one for another time, and we're going to do a whole artistic analysis there.
And Father, very quickly, you get the last word.
Yes, Alejandra, I would just say, we have to go back to define what religion is all about. So, and I support what Jen said. It's going to be a discussion for another day, because once we're able to define, each of us define what religion is all about for you and the meaning of religion, and then we can begin to talk about the influence on other people.
And I'm going to offer this to Alejandro. These two people are available in the world. When you do your final project for my class, hint, 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 ask them that question on Zoom and record it. There you go. Thank you, folks. I really appreciate you doing this today. In my class, look for that email. We have another guest speaker coming on Thursday. Have a good week, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you so much, everyone, for amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Welcome to my group. Welcome to my group, I tell you.
I just wanted to say thank you to Dr. Merritt and Father Okafor for coming and talking to us.
Very good, Anthony. Thank you. That's very kind.
All right,